Dear colleagues, dear guests, my name is Ilder Tammela. I have the honor to introduce the first block of this conference. And it's titled Western Manipulation, Conscious or Unconscious, Strategies of Impact on Local Culture. Okay, for the beginning, some more practical notes. First, these presentations are meant to last 40 minutes and are being followed by some 5 minutes time for discussion each. And yes, maybe it would be wise to switch your mobile phones on a quiet mode. Okay, now the first presentation today is by Dr. Alfred Reisch. He earned his PhD degree in political science. He has worked in Radio Free Europe and taught in several universities in Europe and in the United States. And as far as I know, he's going to talk about one interesting project the West undertook to break the information monopoly of the Soviet regime. Dr. Reisch, here you go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot say it in Estonian, so I say it in Hungarian. Jó reggel kívánok, hölgyeim és uraim. Same language, you know. So normally I stand. All my life I thought moving around, but now with the privilege of age and the length of time given to me, I prefer to sit. But I promise you I will not bore you too much, because my topic is actually unique. And I must say that, as you know, you probably know Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, but a lot of books have been written about those radios. But the radios had a secret project, and nothing has been written about it. For 35 years, secretly, covertly, Western books and émigré books were being mailed inside, behind the Iron Curtain, and also being distributed to East European visitors coming to the West. So this was a fantastic and unique project. I just completed a 500-page book on this. Hot books in the Cold War. It sounds very good. Actually, what you have in the program is the subtitle. But I could add a third subtitle, which would be the power of the book. Never underestimate the power of a book. And this is what the Soviet cultural watchdogs forgot, especially after Helsinki final act. So, having said that, let me go into my topic. I have, for the first time, since the book will be out in January, I put together a comprehensive text for this conference, 49 pages. I will not read 49 pages. Once in a while I will look so I don't lose the thread. But I will try to tell you for the first time what I gathered, also on the Baltics. The Baltic project lasted from 56 until 70, when it was terminated, at least officially. And I was able to collect enough material on the side, on the Baltics, which will make it possible to publish a second monograph on the Baltic states, all three of them. And in this, I will give you at the end, if I have the time, some information about what was going on in connection with Estonia and also Latvia and Lithuania. I see a lot of young people in this room. I'm sure most of you probably don't even know that books were being smuggled into your country. But older people, your parents or grandparents, must remember it, because we have the letters. I have the letters which were sent from Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania to the West. So, this project actually lasted 34 years. It was an American project. It actually financed throughout the 34 years by the CIA. The bad CIA did a good thing. Imagine. They paid all the bills. They paid for 10 million books. And it was not easy, because every month, every year, you had to go and tell them how the books were spent, what was sent, how was the response, and then you had to wait for the next year. Fiscal year, year after year in the US, you wait for the money. And there were periods when it was difficult to get the money. But we got the money. The project survived the whole Cold War. This secret project ended in September 1991. This was a few months before the end of the Soviet Union. So we can safely say that it lasted throughout the Cold War. It was started in July 56. So how do I go? What am I doing here today? I was involved in this project for 15 years in New York. 15 years I was in charge of the Hungarian policy or activities, and I had all my colleagues with me. We had a Czechoslovak section, a Polish section, very important, Romanian, Bulgarian, and we had 3 Baltic editors who were basically part-time but helping us. I remember the name of the Estonian gentleman. His name was Rosare. I forgot the first name now. He ended up as the head of the Estonian service of the Voice of America. So probably you have some biographic information on Mr. Rosare. He was our Estonian editor. And I must say, I'm a survivor. All my colleagues died, and I have 2 colleagues who were not desk chief or plan advisors, a Czechoslovak lady and a Romanian lady, who are still alive, over 80, and the memory is gone. When I talked to them, they said, you have to write it, you have to write it. This is the way to do it because you are the last Mohicans. We forgot everything. When I spoke to the Romanian lady, she was amnesic. So we had to go to her basement and get out all the Romanian documents from her basement. And she just gave it to me. She said, I don't remember anything, take it. Imagine this kind of situation. So I felt my duty, it was my duty to write this story. You know, I don't know how much time I have, but it had to be done. It took me 4 years, and it's done. In January, if you are really interested, you can get the book. Hot Books in the Cold War. And it was true. It was hot books. Where do I get my sources? This is very important. I went to the Hoover Archives of Stanford University, which has a fantastic archives on the radios, and also the collection of our reports. It's called the Minden Collection, named after my big boss, CIA boss, George Minden. So you also have to go to other archives, the Library of Congress in Washington, to some university libraries at Georgetown, Ottawa. You have archives there too. So it took a long time to get the stuff together. It was not easy. And I must say that in this project, immediately to clarify, it was not just US. Every West European country was involved. Even the neutrals, like Austria, very much, and Switzerland were involved in this. The deal was this. These governments said, okay, you can do this business with the books, but we don't want to know about it. There was a tolerance, you know, okay, you do it, but very discreetly. And this is why the project had to be secret. I must explain right away. It had to be secret because if it's in the open, with Radio Free Europe mentioned, you know, the radios were the cover. Then the communist censors and the government would immediately stop it. And the Western public opinion, you know, in the 50s was still, there was plenty of communist parties in France, in Belgium, very strong, Italy. So the Western government said, okay, Americans, you do it, you pay, fine. But, you know, discreet, be discreet. So we had to do it very discreetly. It had to be done with people whom you could trust. And my boss was so conscious about security that in 35 years, this organization he set up with different names was never penetrated by the secret service of the communist regimes. They penetrated the radios, they penetrated all kinds of government agencies in the West, but they never penetrated our organization. It is amazing. Once they saw him, the Czechoslovak service was watching a bookshop in Vienna, and they saw this man in a gray suit coming in and out, and they reported on the man on the gray suit. This is all they knew about the boss. Now, who is this man? I call him, I dedicated my book to him because he did rendered a fantastic service. George Minden was born in Bucharest. He was Romanian born with an English father. So when the communists took over Romania, he was able to go to England and then to Spain, Mexico, and finally in the US. He was a very educated man, spoke many languages, including Latin. To annoy the Americans, he wrote sometimes memos in Latin, which the people in Washington had to understand. It was his sense of humor. Cultured man of culture. And his widow is still alive. So I went to see Mrs. Minden, and she gave me all the documents, personal documents, which were missing from the archives. So now I have a pretty good picture of the man and what he did. Private correspondence, which he destroyed. He destroyed everything. When he closed his office in New York in 91, he destroyed everything. But he sent all his reports to Washington, the CIA. And I will tell you more about this problem. Again, the first cover was Radio Free Europe. Free Europe Committee. But there was just a cover, because we did it like this. We invented names. International Literary Center, International Advisory, Book Fellowship. There were 20 bogus names like this, and this was to confuse the communist regimes. And distribution centers were set up all over Europe. And finally, we got also book mailers, real publishers. We made deals with these publishers. We said, we will give you addresses, you send the books to East Europe or Baltics, we will pay for the books, but you must give us the letters you receive. And this is how we got the letters. And the letters are the empirical evidence of the impact, of the influence of this project. People were listening to the radios, but no book can be written about how all these people, listening to the radios, maybe the next day they forgot everything. When you read a book, you don't forget that easily. So I was able, through empirical evidence, to prove or to document authentically the impact and influence of this book program on each country, starting with Poland. Poland was the most important country. In Warsaw, I just gave a paper in April about the impact of the book distribution on Poland. The Polish people knew very little about this. I noticed in the Baltic states, nothing is known about this. And I have some letters I want to quote later on something. So it started very well. Until 1970, the radio was the cover. We had all these bogus organizations. We had the publishers. And then we set up another network we called person-to-person distribution. The Poles started this. The Polish network already existed during the war. When Poland was occupied by the Nazis, the Polish government in exile was in London. They had an incredible network. Bookshops, publishers, emigre magazines. The most important was Kultura, published in Paris. And this Polish network began to set up distribution points. And of course, we paid. We said, wonderful, we can pay your books. And then they started distributing in 57, 58, 59. You had a Polish distribution centers giving out books and periodicals to Polish visitors to the West. So when Mr. Minden took over this project, because he didn't start it was started by another man called Walker, Sam Walker Jr., was the head of, the vice president of the Free Europe Committee. Walker was the initiator. 56, 59 is the Walker period. He launched the project, and then Minden took over. And Walker was supporting this Polish program. It was very successful. Hundreds and hundreds of Polish visitors came to the London, Paris, everywhere, got books, periodicals. So Minden said, okay, we are going to do the same for Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria. Where were these distribution centers? For the Baltics also. So we set up our distributors everywhere. London, Paris, Rome, Vienna, Munich, Hamburg, Stockholm, and Lund in Sweden. Sweden was the best channel for the Baltics. And this network lasted, until the end of the Cold War. It was fantastic. And everybody somehow knew, people, word of mouth. They went home, they said, I received books in Paris. Well, where did you get these books? Well, I went to Maison Lafitte or Galerie Lambert, and they gave me these books, so you go. So they started coming. At the end, so many people came that we had to limit the distribution. 1 or 2 books. When they wanted 20 books, it was too much. The budget every year could pay for 100,000 books. So the distribution program was very successful, and there was an extra reason. Political books were dangerous. Very, very often people would get political books by the mail, and it was confiscated or stolen by the censors or the postal people. But political books, when you gave it to visitors, they could hide it in their luggage, they could hide it in their pockets, and they took it back. Smuggling books. We have a third book being planned by the distributors themselves. It will be called We Were All Book Smugglers. Each of these people is writing down his story. How many people he met, what we talked with them, what books they took, etc. And again, these distributors were our best information source. They told us exactly what the people wanted, or how they felt, what books they wanted, how they felt about the situation in their country. And I must say, this was the most successful program. After 1970, P2P, person-to-person program, was more important than the mailing program. More and more political books and other books, religion, sociology, philosophy was also political for the communists. It's not Marxist-Leninist. So these books were given out to thousands of visitors. I prepared a chart for the period 56-73. By November 63, we had already mailed over 1 million books. So you can imagine the success. Before Walker, actually, who got the idea of sending books or using printed word for political, psychological warfare, you might say cultural warfare? It was George Kennan, the father of containment policy. Those of you who studied history should remember George Kennan. He died recently. He was 101 years old. And the former director of Radio Free Liberty, Mr. Patch, was 100 years this summer. I cannot interview him. He's 100 years old, but his daughter gave me a lot of information about the Russian project. So it was very complicated, and I will try to simplify it. To give you an idea how this thing worked, imagine a spider web going out from New York. The New York Book Center was the brain, Minden and his staff. And the spider web spread basically to West Europe, also to Canada, to Argentina, to Taiwan, to Turkey, So it was really impossible for the communist censors and watchdogs, the cultural watchdogs, to figure out what is this. Publishers were involved. People got the books. Nobody knew why. You know, they asked questions. Who are you? Are you a nice grandfather, a Baba Noel, you know, Father Christmas, or who are you? Hungarians thought it was UNESCO project. Some people said it was probably some generous millionaire somewhere. Nobody thought of the CIA. And we were invisible. We were supposed to be invisible. And the people in Vienna who were the closest to the Iron Curtain were the most invisible of all. Mr. Straka, who was our man in Vienna, is still alive. He wrote a chapter in my book. And Mr. Straka had to be very, very careful. Why? Because the Austrian government, the Austrian Socialist Party, was involved up to here in this operation. Imagine that some Western governments were using the diplomatic pouch to smuggle our books into Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other places in Russia. And this was to be done. Spitzfingergefühl, you say in German? I don't know how to translate it. It had to be done very carefully. You cannot jeopardize security, and you cannot jeopardize the whole project. One mistake, and that's it. They didn't like this project. You know, in the newspapers, in the communist press, people said these nasty imperialists are sending these provocative books. There were directives to the libraries. If you get books, turn them over to the main library. And they had a closed section there. I don't know if it was done here, libri prohibiti. So only people who had permission, special permission, could get to these books. But everybody cheated, you know, everybody cheated in this business. So they did this kind of thing. Our worst enemy was the censors. And censors were erratic. Sometimes they were nice and let everything through. Sometimes they got nasty, probably from above, you know, they confiscated books, sent them books back, not admitted. And we had a problem with the censorship. A whole chapter had to be written on the censorship. And we had the theft. Postal employees stole, custom officers stole books where they sold it on the black market. But my boss said, that's good, everybody will buy it on the black market. You know? Why not? Or in second book shops. Some people really probably read the book and sold them, or even more important for us, gave it to their friends. In your country, Estonia, groups of people were circulating the same book around and around until the book was almost falling apart. So they asked for more copies. I have 10 friends. They all want this book. They're all envious of me. Send 10 more copies, and they gave the addresses. It's amazing how people felt about this book. The reaction of the recipients, joy, gratitude, amazement, and the happiness that we are not cut off from the West. We are remembered. We are remembered. People are thinking about us. And what was very important for these East Europeans, we had emigres, you know, exiles. People who had left, let's say, the Baltic states before the war. They lived in the US, in Canada, everywhere, and they wrote books in Latvian, in Estonian, in Lithuanian. And we got these books, we bought them, and we sent them to these countries. The biggest number of non-Western books was sent to Poland. Hundreds of books in Polish, which was political dynamite for the communist regime, were sent to Poland. I must say, since we talk about Poland, that it was the most liberal, you know, in the Gomulka for a while after 56, Poland was very liberal. We got most of the letters from Poland. The first few years, hardly any letters came from Romania or Bulgaria. very strict censorship, and everything came from Poland, and then later on Hungary. We had to stop sending books after the Hungarian Revolution. For a while, for 1 year, no books to Hungary. It was too dangerous. Then we resumed, and Hungary became second after Poland. And I want to show you, I want to read you, and I can only read quotes. I hate to read paper, and you don't like it either, but I want to read you what the characteristics, maybe if I find this page. Minden had a philosophy about not only the project. It started very political, and too many political books were sent. Revisionism, Yugoslavia, Tito, Polish cross-reporting. So he changed that. He said we should use non-political books which have a political impact. So we started sending books on modern art, modern architecture, literature, music, even records, cassettes. And this went like, hotcakes. And the CIA agreed. First they wanted only political books. But we worked independently. We got the money, and in a way, Mr. Minden acted pretty much on his own. I'm amazed how the things he did. They said to him, it's too dangerous to send Solzhenitsyn. I will send it. In '65, they said, maybe we should stop the Baltic project. I don't know why. I have the memo from the CIA suggesting that we stop sending books to the Baltic states. It's too dangerous. Minden was very smart, good diplomat. He said, we are not going to increase our mailings to Baltic states. we played around, and books continued to go to your countries. Well, I cannot find this quote right now. I have so much here, but basically he considered Poland, Hungary, the leading countries, which had really the feel for European culture. They belonged to the West, so to speak. And then there was another category, Czechoslovakia and Estonia. Estonia was not was considered very progressive, and it was put in category 1.5, so to speak. At the bottom, you had Romania, Bulgaria, Lithuania, and Latvia, which were not responsive. I can tell you now that most people from your country were individuals, people who were not afraid to write letters. In Latvia and Lithuania, we only got usually letters from libraries or institutions, very tightly controlled, and people probably afraid. They got the books, but they were too afraid to say they got it. We never knew exactly how many books went through and how many were confiscated. But we were told later. People were afraid. Hungarians told me I was afraid to thank this book because they checked my mail. Or they forgot. Many people just forgot. So we sent a reminder. Suddenly he acknowledged, he thanked us for 10, 20 books. Apologized for forgetting. He didn't forget, he just was playing cautious. But again, this differentiation. Then what happened at the end of the 60s, if those of you know the history, the CIA cover of the radios was was blown by some leftist newspaper in America, and some senators went into the act and they wanted radios closed. And it was Kissinger and Nixon and others who saved the radios. A new system was introduced. I have to be careful. And it was paid now, the radios were paid by the US Congress, and we had to get out. The book project, everything non-radio was removed from the Free Europe, and we ended up in our own building directly under CIA. And we took this name, International Advisory Council. And it was almost like CIA with different order of letters. No, the people in the East never realized that, perhaps. IAC, CIA. And then in '75, what happened? Radio Liberty they wanted to terminate Radio Liberty. And Radio Liberty had the secret project of distributions to Russia. And they gave it to Minden. Mr. Patch, who is 100 years old, gave the whole project to Mr. Minden. So suddenly we are distributing books and mailing books to Russia, Soviet Union. And we took over the Russian distributors. Many of them, all over. Some of them were not even Russian. They were Italians, they were Czechs, and the Polish distributors had to tell. Mr. Minden went to each of them and said, you must give books to Russia. Now imagine a Polish book distributor. Well, now I'm going to give books to Russians. Yes, some liked it, some did not. We are going to get less money for Poland. We're going more money to Russia. And it's true. I can tell you that by the end of the project, in the 80s, about 65% of the books were going to Russia and the remainder to East Europe. The shift came after Helsinki, the basket 3 provisions. And Carter, President Carter, and Reagan after him, wanted an increase of mailings of books to Russia. And they were fighting in Russia at home. This was not done before by the other presidents. They were more careful. Brzezinski, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the advisor, national security advisor to Carter, sent us letters. You must send more books to even the Baltic states and everywhere else. They've been neglected. Well, it was a very difficult enterprise. So the last years was basically Russia first and East Europe second. Well, Poles were not exactly happy. A last comment I want to make. I could tell you things for hours, but it's too much. I want to pick out some Baltic things here. What happened during those years, Minden, the big boss, made 2 trips a year to Europe to control, to look at how his people were working. And I can tell you that he was very happy with everybody, but there were problems with the Russians. Intrigues, denunciations, drinking. And he had lots of headaches with these Russians and some Poles also. And it's interesting, he treated his people like a father, took care of their personal problem, paid for the rent, paid for the medical treatment. It's unbelievable. He was like a pater familias with a big family. We had hundreds of people, and I have their names. Some of them I will not put in the books because not everybody wants to be exposed like this. I asked permission. Those who agreed, I have their names. Those who don't want to, no mention. Now, my conclusion, I went through basically everything. The impact of this book, this is important, the impact and the result. So we can say that for 34 years, or more, all leading members of the East European intelligentsia and part of the elite, part of the managerial elite and the party elite received books and periodicals, through mail and directly when they came to the West. And when I look at the reports, I can see the names of everybody who was very important in those countries, starting with the presidents, the party leaders. We had the Cardinal Wyszynski in Poland, and we had Wojtyla, who became Pope. They all got books. Havel got books. Unbelievable what we have, a collection of names, all the important people. And of course, thousands of teachers, thousands of students, of economists, of clergymen, and the libraries. Every library, including Estonia, I think we had all your libraries in our list. So the result was thousands of letters, which I could analyze and put together as the evidence. And this is the unique character of this story, is that we have the evidence, the empirical evidence, showing the impact and the influence of the books. So it was massive. Imagine 10 million books. It was secret. Some people called it the West's secret Marshall Plan for the mind. Very good description. For decades, students, who are not teaching. I met some of the Hungarian students. I sent books. We sent books to. They are not teaching in Hungarian universities. And I when I met them, I said, "Oh, you are the Father Christmas who sent the books?" Yes. "Oh, I love your books. Now I'm teaching." What was the purpose? To break down the isolation, the cultural, ideological, this straitjacket imposed by the communist regimes, and to open up the window to the West, to show them that there was culture there. And everything in the East at the time was a vacuum. It was no universal education anymore. There was no philosophy, religion persecuted. So the idea was to break down the ideological Iron Curtain, and we did it. So in conclusion, I'm willing to say that the book program was just as effective as the radio programs. Of course, the radio programs were important, but we don't have much evidence. Empirical evidence is missing. Whereas with the books, some people showed me, I visited my Hungarian people, who got books. I introduced myself to the writer, to the drama writer. "Oh, you are, I'll show you all the books I received." And he showed me the books. "These are the books we received, and thank you, thank you." So this was an amazing story. So here, give me 5 minutes, and I will tell you about Baltics, if you want to hear it. Because I put this together for you. In 3.5 years, about 660,000 books and periodicals were sent to the East European countries. Out of those, over 5,000 were sent to Estonia, 200 to Latvia, and 10 for Lithuania. Now, these are book titles, not copies, book titles. And the first title sent to your countries was a speech by Gomulka, where he was denouncing the bad things which were happening in Poland. This was sent to the Baltic states. So we started political. But eventually, the Baltic figure going up, 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 up. By the second half of 66, 18,000 books had been sent to Baltic states. You got the most, 8,000. Latvians, 5,000, 5,000 to Latvia, and 4,000 to Lithuania. And we got almost 1,000 letters back, most of them from Estonia. This was a surprise, that the Estonians writing openly, "Thank you for the book, thank you for the books." And so I have a total for about 15,000 letters from East Europe to 59, 433 from Estonia, only 130 from Lithuania, and 74 Latvia. So you see always Estonia first, Latvia behind, far behind, and Lithuania at the end. There must have been terrible censorship. KGB was active everywhere. What was sent to your countries? Well, we sent from Stockholm and to Boston and New York. We sent books in English, in French, in German, and then in your languages. And I have made a list quickly of the émigré authors. First of all, the first Estonian book was sent, it was a medical book, a home medical book called Kumu Art, 2 volumes by Dr. Alfred. This is history. People were suddenly asking for this book. We have no doctor. The doctor is far away from our village. So we sent Kumu Art over and over again. Then we sent émigré literature. And some of these names must be known to you. Bernard Kangro, Andrew Sareste, Helmi Milo, I hope I pronounced this right, Ene Lind, Gerd Helbeme, Theo Kodak, Peter Lindsar, Arthur Reintaham, Tab August Malk, Gustav Litz, Gustav Rank, and Valev Uibupu, August Kitzberg, and so on. And this is just the first list. I have more. I don't want to read Estonian names here all morning, but we had them all. And the people said, it's amazing. They didn't know, you are Father Noel. How do you get my address? And so on. Telephone books. CIA gave us all the telephone books. So the cost, you wonder, who paid? Yeah, the CIA. We got about out of the free budget, we got maybe 18, out of $18 million, we got maybe 1.5 for the books. Later on, when we were on own, we got $2 billion. At the end, we got $2 million because of Russia. And I have the figures for Estonia, how much Estonia costs to the CIA. This is my own research. Estonia costs to the CIA 8 million, let's say, $8. Lithuania was a little less expensive, 7 million, and Latvia was 6 million. So you see, the story is that simply, for little money, we achieved a lot, and no life was lost. This is my last word. This kind of psychological, ideological, political warfare was won without the loss of any life, and the cost was not so big, but the effect was tremendous. We pierced this iron curtain. Thank you for attention. I will stop here, and I welcome questions now.
Thank you, Dr. Reisch. At first, I would like to use my power position and ask the first question by myself. It's actually consists of 2 parts. Can you tell us which was the exact profile of this target audience in mailing these books? Were these only, how to say, intellectuals in the field of humanities, like literature and theater and culture overall, or were there also so-called ordinary people? And second part of this question: how exactly the exact names were picked?
Well, first of all, the answer is first we started the CIA. Had the idea of targeting the communist elite, the elite members, the intellectuals, whatever elite, people who were not, not afraid, they could get the mail, the communists always got their mail, and this was the ruling elite. But the ruling elite also included managers, professors, journalists who were working, communist journalists, hit those first. But then eventually, Milan changed all that. We started sending books to everybody. Professors, teachers, doctors, medicine books, economics books, artists, everybody. So at the end, students were the last group. At the end, we had more students. At the end, in the 70s, most of the responses and the books taken back was taken by students. Overwhelming majority of students, followed by professors and teachers. The other categories behind. Priests were very good. Polish priests. In Rome, we had a distribution center in the Vatican. Every bishop got books who went back from the council. They had so many books that the Italian railroad said, these Polish priests are carrying tons of books. What is this? They have to pay for this. The whole car was filled with, train was filled with boxes filled with books. The Czech cardinals, bishops did the same. So everybody, at the end I can say everybody. How we got the address? It started small. We had a list, we went to telephone books, and then we got them from other people. In the book we put a slip. You can choose free of charge another book and give the name of 2 friends or 3 friends, and we will send them books too. So at the end we started with 30,000 address, then at the end we had 100,000 address. I have the total for each country, how many addresses we had. And we got more and more. At the end, when Romania was free of censorship, at the end of Ceausescu, 70s, Romanian letters arrived, so many letters arrived from Romania. They were hungry for books, Western culture, that we could not meet all the Romanian requests. The people in London said, my God, Romanians are coming everywhere here. They sent 50 more people. They want 10 books each, or 20 books each. So we said, give them 2. Otherwise, we have no books anymore for everybody. It was a flood. Yeah, it was I would say really it was avalanche. A snowball effect from year to year. You know, the figures show, on the chart I gave you, you can see the figures going up, 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 up. In 68, the best year, Milan said, best year, over 300,000 books were sent and given out, over 3,000. And after that, it went down a little bit, but still we stayed always in the 200,000 range. Starting with 50,000, 100,000, we ended up average over 200,000, once over 300,000 books. So the statistics are quite clear. And you know, I was lucky. I got the exact figures. This man was a bookkeeper, perhaps. I mean, he had to account for every penny. When we asked for money, we had to tell how much we paid for salaries, how much we paid for the furniture, how much we paid for the books, for the postage, and so on. The telephone, every penny had to be accounted for.
It's more a comment than a question. I'm just recalling as a student on a government-sponsored exchange scheme to the Soviet Union, and also my husband going regularly to Czechoslovakia as a student. We were used to distribute those books, so we were very involved. And it's interesting how those different schemes linked up. So the student sponsorships to go and do research in Russia or in Czechoslovakia were also linked up with this scheme that you're talking about. But I also wanted to ask you about the impact of the American National Exhibition in Moscow in 1959, where the book exhibition was such a huge success. And in particular, I think the encouragement for theft, that people should be encouraged to actually take away those books. So I wondered if you had any comments on that. Perhaps that encouraged the CIA to go on funding this scheme. Thank you.
You are absolutely right. You know, we organized, with the help of others, there were book exhibits in Sofia, in Bucharest, also in Russia later on. And this was done by the Austrians, mainly. The Austrians were our blanket for these projects. And also in Helsinki, you know, you had Estonian Russian meeting in Finland. There, many Estonians got books in Finland. Finland was sending Bibles also. Through Finland, we smuggled Bibles into Baltic states, and the KGB was so angry that for a while, everything had to be stopped from Finland, because then they clamped down on everything. They got angry at the Bibles. And I should have mentioned, at every conference where Eastern professors or scholars came, we were there. Or every Olympic Games, we were there. The Austrian police was chasing us. They didn't like us. The Russians complained, who are these guys giving books to our athletes? Sportsmen were good smugglers, and seamen were the best. Seamen were the best. The sailors, Russian sailors, Polish sailors, Estonian sailors, everybody was smuggling books in paint cans. They put in a food package, and they sold them on the black market. This was good business, but you are absolutely right. Books exhibit. I have a lot of information about how it was done. Cover was Austria. Bruno Kreisky was the Chancellor of Austria, was involved up to his neck in these projects. But first he said, CIA, oh my God, CIA, oh, they're paying, oh, they're... And then a week later he called back, go ahead, do it. He changed his mind. But do it discreetly. And do you have some of the books still at home? That's good news for me. I am working on this Baltic monograph, and I would like to visit your archives. You know, the libraries in Tartu, in Tallinn, all got books. And I would like to know a little bit more about on the spot. One day maybe I can go to Tartu and see what they have in the library. I have also some names, Estonian names. Should I? It's in public domain, so I can say it. Where are these? Interesting people. Pip Kalf. You know Pip Kalf? He is the director, was the director of the Astrophysical Observatory of Tartu. And Professor Vares, rector of the Estonian Institute of Fine Arts, must be known to some people. They wanted books. Now, many people, we decided to use only their initials. Play it safe. So we put AK or EP, or a nurse sent our address to 10 more nurses, or one teacher gave the name of 10 teachers, but always the initials. We never put the full name on our reports. Because, CIA was a collector of information too. They wanted also the stamps. We like your stamps, CIA people. We didn't give them too many.